Curry Sexton talking with me, now an attorney, former K-State wide receiver and team captain. One of the things that I saw that was very interesting to me was Dan Wolken, who is with USA Today. He basically put the idea out. Now, this was actually a couple of weeks ago. It was even before this case ruling came out. But he said, hey, if the NCAA were smart, what they would do is just allow the student athletes basically to unionize and then just try and collectively bargain something with them like you would see at the professional level with the NFL, the NBA. You could take all these issues, right? All these issues that we talk about, name, image, and likeness, transfer, compensation, all that stuff, and just basically negotiate it. But the problem there is, obviously, as we saw with the pushback to Northwestern, it's like at that point you're admitting that they are employees, and so the NCAA has never wanted to do that. Is that the type of solution that you think could work if the NCAA were to ever come around to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that could certainly work. Now, obviously, that would create a whole slew of other issues. When you make the decision that these student athletes are employees, there would be pros and cons for everyone involved. But I think at the end of the day, this idea in sort of the defense the NCAA has always relied on, this idea of amateurism and this idea that limiting the compensation that student athletes can receive, in order to protect sort of the sanctity of collegiate athletics, I think is just, as was astutely pointed out by the Supreme Court, just nonsense. I think we saw 6 or 7 years ago, we saw the cost of attendance cap, the grant and aid cap, get removed. And when that got removed, and what that did for student athletes wasn't a massive shift, but it was a significant shift for them. You saw people up in arms about, well, this is going to change the way, that we view college sports. It's going to change college sports. I'm not going to watch it anymore. And all that we've seen since then is the popularity of college sports continue to grow. And if you permit student athletes to rightfully earn money off of their name, image, and likeness, however that may be, even to the fullest extent, where they essentially get bought out, I still don't think that's going to change the way that people view college sports, because by and large, there aren't going to be that many student athletes whose name, image, and likeness is worth all that much money. And so at the end of the day, the market is going to set itself. And yes, certain student athletes, the Zion Williamson, the Trevor Lawrence, people of that magnitude, sure, they're going to make a boatload of money off of it. But, at the end of the day, those people are already making money off of it. So are things really changing, I guess, is the question. But in my mind, this concern about preserving amateurism and preserving the pro-competitive aspects of collegiate athletics, I think is just nonsense. And I think at the end of the day, the easiest thing to do would be to just permit these student athletes to be compensated, to market themselves, and to let that market set itself.
Curry Sexton talking with me again here. I could have this conversation all day. I find all of this very, very fascinating. I'll just leave you with this, because I know this is something that I hear a lot from K-State fans and just college sports fans in general, but it's this idea that, like, hey, a school like K-State could get left in the dust with the name, image, and likeness stuff because, say, Alabama, Texas, wherever, other bigger schools, they can offer more money. They can have a booster come in and say, hey, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars to come here and play. And the K-State would be sort of left out in the cold, and it would increase the difference between the haves and the have-nots. How do you see that breaking down and affecting a school like K-State in the future?
I think that's I get the concern, but at the end of the day, we've already, it's from a recruiting perspective, we've already been left in the dust by the Alabamas and the Clemsons and the Oklahomas. We just cannot compete with them, just very generally. You see it with the kid from Hays, Kansas right now. He starts getting offered by all these big-time schools, and our chances are lost. And so a concern that we'd be lost in the dust, I think that concern is sort of lost on me, because, the type of the caliber of athlete that we're recruiting, the three-star athlete, is not the type of guy whose schools are going to be coming to and saying, hey, we can market you, we can do this for you, we can set you up with this car company or whatever it may be. And so I think ultimately it's not going to change things because, and part of that, like I mentioned earlier, is that, these big time schools are probably paying these kids anyway. So really, it probably opens the playing field to some extent. And I think one thing that intrigues me about Manhattan is that Manhattan is through and through a college town, unlike some of its competitors. And so K-State would have a really unique opportunity to find ways to market its student athletes, or to allow student athletes to market themselves and to sell that market in Manhattan and in the state of Kansas to prospective student athletes. Whereas, some bigger schools or some schools situated in bigger cities may not have that same luxury because their city does not, their city does not go based on how the university and its athletics programs go. And so I understand the concern, but I don't think that concern carries a lot of weight, at least in my mind.
Yeah, for example, K-State just lost Brandon Best, an offensive lineman, to Georgia Tech, right, in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're in the future, if you're able to say, hey, man, you come here and be – now, this is an offensive lineman, so maybe the point is a bit moot, but if that's a running back and you say, hey, you can come here and be the next Deuce Vaughn, and what's your value here versus your value in Atlanta, then I think that's exactly the point that you're making there, correct?
Or absolutely. Or if you're Jaron Kanak, whatever his name is, the kid from Hayes, if you're a kid from Hayes, Kansas, where you're a 4-star recruit, you're blowing up all over the internet, and you're most of the people in the communities that surround Hayes and include Hayes are Kansas State fans. You have an opportunity to basically be your own market. If you're a kid like Jaron Kanak and you come to Kansas State, you stand out from the minute you get there. You have an ability to market yourself across the state, especially given the fact that you're from the western part of the state where there's a lot of money and there's a lot of K-State support. If you go to Clemson, and I'm not saying Greenville's big because it's not, but if you go to Clemson, you're competing with every other football player is just like you. They were 4 or 5-star recruits. The ability to capitalize on the market isn't as significant as it may be in Manhattan for a big-time recruit. So I would even argue that to some extent, name, image, and likeness could swing things in a way that could favor K-State, because Jaron Kanak would much more quickly and for a longer period of time be a household name in Kansas before he'd be one in South Carolina.